Ohio State will be the undisputed 2021 Big Ten champions, and this will be their fifth Big Ten title in a row. Fact. Argue it. You have nothing. You have absolutely nothing. No team in recent memory has really come close to beating Ohio State since 2018. The Indiana game in 2020 was in truth, to be honest, the last touchdown was a garbage point, and Ohio State dominated for much of that game and clutched when they needed to. 2019, no team, from what I remember, was within 11 points of losing to Ohio State, rather. Pardon me. In 2018, they had many close games, but always clutched up and only lost to Purdue. No team can challenge the Buckeyes. They are so far invincible. Now they do, for the first time in what feels like a millennia, are starting a quarterback, no matter who they start, will have never thrown a collegiate pass. And this, some say, is a weakness, and I think actually, no matter what you say, it is a weakness, but how much of a weakness? Is it a weakness to any Big Ten team in the Big Ten East or West? I don't think so. Is it a weakness to teams with elite defenses? I don't think so. Is it a weakness in really any regard? I don't think so. Now, you look at Ohio State's secondary, and that's a little different of a story, I think, heading into next year. But I think for the Big Ten, it still stays the same. The secondary situation almost doesn't matter in the Big Ten because, circle back, the Big Ten East is a joke. It is a massive, utter... It's a group of really 7 disappointments. Well, 6, excluding Ohio State. A group of 6 disappointments and 1 golden boy who cannot lose for his life. And that's Ohio State. And if you're an Ohio State fan, this is amazing. Except unless you're an Ohio State fan who chases beating great teams in your division, then it's absolutely miserable because you're literally burning dried out gutter trash. It's all you're doing. But Ohio State in 2021 returns 12 starters. That's less than Indiana in their division, less than Penn State. It's more than Michigan, though, and it's only more than Michigan, but they have a ton of talent coming in. They have a ton of talent returning, and honestly, those 12 returning starters are probably more valuable than all of Rutgers combined, combined like 19, in all honesty, which is an insane amount of returning production. Ohio State has Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave as the best possible wide receiver duo in the country, both at a combined 13 touchdowns and about 14,500 receiving yards, around that number. Very, very talented group. Garrett Wilson is, at this moment, a sophomore. Chris Olave, a junior. You also have the talented, massive, athletic Jeremy Ruckert at tight end, who is also a junior, 6'5", 250 pounds. This man could have played basketball, but is instead, last season, racked up 5 touchdowns and 150 receiving yards for the elite, let me repeat that for you, the elite Ohio State Buckeyes offense. The offense returns a total of 7 starters, including the 3 I just mentioned. You got some offensive linemen returning. I think you might have maybe another receiver returning. And Master Teague definitely will return, though many Ohio State fans have told me they don't like his elusiveness, and it is quite the possibility that Travion Henderson, incoming 5-star freshman, who has already had many stories told about how talented and he is and the desire he has to win, Many say he could be given possibly a start. I don't know. We'll see. Ohio State's defense, again, as I mentioned, is a little more of a concern. They only have 5 returning starters compared to the offense's 7. And they, in the big picture view, they allowed 6 yards per play and about 26 points a game last year, which is for Ohio State standards pretty bad. But they return almost the entirety of the defensive line, and they do have Sevyn Banks returning as well, but starting cornerback. And I can imagine he will help mentor some of the younger cornerbacks and defensive backs and help the coaching staff and Kerry Coombs and the cornerbacks coach rebuild the secondary room, because it certainly, after last season, needs to be rebuilt if Ohio State wants to reach the national title game again. But for Big Ten standards, let me tell you something. It will not matter how good this secondary room or linebacker room will be. Let me give you an example. Let's say it's October 30th, 2021. Penn State, with Mike Yurcich as their coordinator, comes in. Penn State's a really good team. I don't think they'll be as good as they are as I'm having them be in this scenario, but who cares? They're playing it near their ceiling. They probably only have 1 loss, maybe 2 losses, maybe they'll doubt it. They're undefeated. They come in Ohio Stadium. It's a massive matchup, and let's say Clifford and Dotson are tearing up every team they face. And that's what's expected to happen here. It's expected to be a shootout. But what's going to happen when you put an inferior Penn State O-line against a Ohio State D-line that has Larry Johnson as its guiding coach, as its position coach, and both the edges are returning too, so we know how that's going to end up. And yeah, Clifford won't have time to get all those deep passes off. And we know that Ohio State's cornerbacks at least have decent reaction times. They play at Ohio State. So even if the secondary room's bad, it's not going to matter when Sean Clifford is forced to heave the ball on 3rd and 30 and 3rd and 20, because the cornerbacks will have enough time to react, even if they're absolute garbage. The pressure that this line will give and will impose its will on Big Ten offenses will be amazing. This will be the best defensive line in the country next year, in my opinion. And Ohio State's O-line to match it will be probably not the best, but it'll certainly be top 10. Very good, elite offensive line. And the rest of Ohio State's division, I'm sorry, but the rest of the division next year, outside of maybe Indiana, is a complete and utter joke and a disaster. Michigan and Penn State having their first losing season since Michigan in 2014, respectively, and since Penn State in since the early 2000s when Joe Paterno had that awful stretch. And yeah, and if we remember how both those teams have played against Ohio State in the last few years, Penn State choked away a lead in 17. They were dominating OSU, and they let him back in the game. Franklin said, "Oh, wait, hold my beer. I want to lose more than you do." And they lost by a point. 2017, Michigan is leading 14-0 at home. They held Ohio State to negative yards, I believe, in the first quarter. Another choke, and Ohio State wins, gets them to the Big Ten championship game and a 12-win season. 2018, Penn State again plays a close game. Franklin, again, hands the lead over like a friend handing his other friend a beer. And 2018, Michigan, it just gets bludgeoned. We won't even talk about that. 19 is the same result for Michigan. 19, Penn State, in the end, the score was close, but that game should have been 35-0. Penn State's, or 35-7 maybe. Penn State's offense couldn't get anything. They couldn't get anything going at all. That was just a slow churning and beating of Penn State. Really. And then in 2020, Michigan was too scared to play Ohio State, so they opted out. And they said, oh, COVID, we can't play. Probably desperately coughing on each other to prevent being destroyed by the Buckeyes. And in, oh, please, the Penn State game last year, the first play was like a 50-so-yard run by Master Teague, who, again, Ohio State fans say, does not have the greatest elusiveness or the best talent in that running back room. And on the first play, Penn State lets him have a large run. Franklin then proceeds to go for it on like 4th and 5 on his own side of the field, which, looking at how the score in the end was probably a horrible decision. And I don't think it'll change in 2021. I think Penn State and Michigan are in a complete and utter disgrace for being next to blue blood teams, and saying that they can compete with Ohio State is a complete and utter lie at this point. Rutgers and Indiana, in my opinion, those two head coaches are the greatest currently for their past achievements and for, I think, last season's achievements after Ryan Day. And I don't think they have the depth to beat Ohio State. I think their coaches have the smarts to. And since both teams host Ohio State, these two, depending on how Ohio State and these teams are playing, this could be maybe an upset watch, but I don't think so. I think Ohio State beats them both. And then Michigan State and Maryland, they both have more talent than Indiana and Rutgers, but I think their coaches are inferior. Though in my Maryland video, which you guys should check out, I do mention how I think the staff changes by Mike Loxley and Talia Tagovailoa and the great recruiting they have done could turn them not into a contender, but a 7-8 win, maybe 9 win, counting the bowl. It could turn them into a pretty decent football team who could compete with most teams in the Big Ten. Very well possibility. But the East overall, currently heading into 2021 in its current state, is broken. It's a disgrace. It's broken. The West, it was broken last year, but far more honorable. The teams, Northwestern competed very well with Ohio State. And honestly, I think Iowa probably would have had the better chance to beat them, since Iowa had a better offense. And Wisconsin's defense probably would have done to Ohio State what Northwestern's did in the first half. And the halftime score probably would have been 9-6. Just being honest here. So, and then looking at Ohio State's schedule, you got Minnesota, Oregon, and Tulsa all starting. All of these teams, I think, will be average to solid. I don't think any of these teams will be elite, but they'll be average to solid. And Minnesota and Oregon return a great amount of production, and they both have good head coaches in PJ Fleck and Mario Cristobal. Tulsa just went to the American Championship game and competed with Cincinnati quite nicely in that game. But I think all of these, except for either Oregon or Minnesota, bold, I have it as Minnesota, but Oregon, I'd say, is the next likely, will upset the Buckeyes. The lack of a quarterback who's thrown a collegiate pass and the rocky secondary, and I think both will start out rocky but get better by the end of the year. It'll culminate in an upset, likely in the month of September, if not the month of October. And if not by then there's no upset at all. The November games and the Penn State game are basically freebies at this point. So, yeah, that means Akron, Rutgers, Maryland, all wins. Probably start out 6-0 or 5-1. And if they do start out 5-1, the Indiana game likely will 100% be a win. I can't see Ohio State losing more than one regular season game. If they win 2, then I'm going to make a video saying this Ohio State season is kind of an abject failure. It just kind of is. The expectations no longer just win the Big Ten championship. With how dominant you are, you have to reach the playoff next to every year. And after Indiana, got Penn State, Nebraska, Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan. Again, I think all of those are freebies. Nebraska will probably be the most competitive team, and I say that because they returned most of their defensive starters. They made defensive improvements, and I think Scott Frost kind of knows that time is up. And this last year was probably Scott Frost's best best team. If we're being honest here, if they had the non-conference games, they probably would have went bowling. Just my opinion. Ohio State will beat whoever they meet in the championship game. At this point, I'd almost give Iowa the better chance because they're just a different team, and Kirk Ferentz has beaten them before. Christ, Northwestern's coach is on the tip of my tongue. Pat Fitzgerald, Paul Christ, Kirk Ferentz, and PJ Fleck, I think, are amazing coaches. I think Brett Bielema will do well at Illinois. The West has the far better chance to beat Ohio State, not just because they don't often meet them in the regular season, but the championship game, even though it's been dominated by Ohio State, is just an entirely different environment, in my opinion. Again, the Buckeyes rule. I don't think any team can stop Ohio State, if we're being honest here. And really, props to the Buckeyes for doing this. As a Michigan fan, for being this dominant. I think it'll be their fifth. Hate to say it, it'll be their fifth in a row Big Ten championship, and it'll be their third under Ryan Day. That's all I have for this video. Remember to like and subscribe and comment your thoughts below, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified about my future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.